So we're going to jump right in, and it's really exciting. The CBRS band, at AT&T, we see this band as an area of innovation. There's a lot of opportunity that mobile operators, as well as the industry alike, can take advantage of this band specifically. If you look at AT&T and what we've been doing for the last couple of years, we've been densifying our network. We've been using picocells with LTE Pro type capabilities, FD MIMO, dual connectivity, higher order modulation, virtualization, and LAA. And so that's been very good. That gives us some capabilities to get upwards of a gigabit per second by leveraging this technology. If you go all the way to the top right, millimeter wave. We've publicly stated we intend to launch our mobile 5G service in the millimeter wave bands by the end of this year. And in fact, just over this last weekend, we're successful in making the world's first millimeter wave 5G call using a mobile form factor device. But you see that shared block. In the US, from a spectrum perspective, we've got some great spectrum holdings in the low mid bands. We've got some great spectrum holdings in millimeter wave and auctions coming that open up that access. But that shared spectrum band becomes very important because of the characteristics of that band. And so this band will allow us to augment all of the other spectrum holdings, the licensed holdings that we have in the lower portions, the licensed portion that we have in the upper bands. We can leverage this in several different use cases, but we can leverage it together with those bands to deliver new services. We have to look a little bit at the propagation characteristics, and I look at it in my team in two different ways. We look at it first from an outdoor perspective, and we look at it from an indoor perspective. From an outdoor perspective, when we go and we compare the spectrum, we today have fixed wireless service in our WCS holdings, the 2.3 gig. And so we have to look at it from the perspective of how does the CBRS band augment or support the services that we offer there. Certainly with the power limits with CBRS and with the propagation characteristics, it's a little bit less than we can get out of our WCS holdings. But from a spectrum perspective, it allows us to offer greater throughputs. And so now you go into the rural America and areas that broadband services have been very difficult to serve, and you can bring CBRS spectrum to now start offering higher throughputs to that segment of the population. Let's make no mistake, there's a third of the geographic area of this country that doesn't have broadband service today. So this band being able to offer fixed wireless services to that constituency is very important, and AT&T intends to use this band, as we announced on Monday, to offer fixed wireless services in these rural communities. If we look at indoor, the band that we really typically compare this to is the 5 gigahertz unlicensed band. Certainly we have lots of indoor systems with licensed spectrum, but when you go and you look at the area, the innovation area for CBRS is really going to go head to head with the Wi-Fi band or 5 gig band. From a propagation perspective, it actually propagates better, right? And so you basically get about 100 feet. And I know several of you from a lot of the work that I've done in the small cell area, and frankly being able to serve with a minimal number of nodes, right? The cost to deploy, if you have to deploy too many nodes, the cost barrier becomes too high. And so if we can use this band to provide compelling services at a cost affordable, effective way, then that's ideal. From a use case perspective, from an industry perspective, and I think Dave showed a lot of this, we've got fixed wireless, we've got private LTE, neutral host, densification, mobile capacity, new mobile services, incumbent services, SaaS services. Not a surprise. But from an AT&T perspective, as we announced Monday, together with our partners Samsung and CommScope, we're going to launch fixed wireless service in this band in 2019. Our next priority is going to be in the private LTE or industrial automation. If you take edge compute capabilities, which AT&T has been very active in driving edge compute capabilities, together with this band, we believe that we can offer compelling services to the manufacturing space. We look at healthcare and we look at retail. There's a lot of capabilities. But the initial use cases, in our opinion, have to be very targeted on where you can control the full end-to-end ecosystem, both the device and the infrastructure. Because while there are devices that are being certified, it takes time for devices to get into the mass market's hands. And so if we go and we look at the natural densification and some of the other capabilities from a consumer perspective, the neutral host, we've got to see a penetration of devices, handsets, right? You're going to have a mass penetration to where you can fully rely on the band. And so we believe that the first two areas are areas that we can start. We can start to innovate and evolve in these areas. And we can grow as the license rules, as you can start to do PALs, as you start to get the penetration of devices. We'll have a much better understanding of the band, how it works, and that'll allow us to drive into neutral host scenarios, both public and private. Every bit of the infrastructure that we're purchasing in this space is 5G capable. It's extremely important. There's still some standardization work necessary to support the band, and there's certainly some rules that need to happen to get the PALs. But that'll come. And so for us, as we make the investment, as we prove in the band, and we prove in the use cases, we have to have a path that allows us to evolve it to the new capabilities that will be introduced with 5G. And so we've been very focused on that in the work that we've done there. We'll start with LTE, but every bit of the equipment is capable of supporting 5G when the time is right. For the, you heard a little bit, the SAS with ESC. Obviously, when we think about the middle of the country, a lot of that 1/3 that doesn't have broadband service today, we probably aren't going to interfere with a lot of the incumbents there. But you still got to make sure as you build that into the coastal areas that the ESC is in place. And so we will obviously have a SAS with ESC capabilities to provide the operation and facilitate that as we go into next year. So if we think about fixed wireless. So in fixed wireless, we'll have our sensor network, ESC core. ESC core will talk to our SAS. Our SAS will talk to our CBSDs, which will ultimately deliver broadband service from a fixed wireless perspective. Outdoor CPE driving the in-home connectivity. We intend to do this with Cat B solutions and certainly with the SAS capabilities, it'll adjust for the interference power and frequencies. I mentioned private LTE. We really believe in the scenario where you take a private LTE system with the CBRS band and you tie that together with edge computing. In the manufacturing space, specifically, you've got to have low latency, you got to have security, and you got to have the ability to contain the data on-prem. Cannot leave the prem. And so when you take those capabilities with the CBRS band tied together with edge compute, we can really have the opportunity to revolutionize manufacturing as we know it today. And so, you know, when we think about machine type communications, we think about safety communications, all of those things are important. If you look in that particular vertical, they've been working to try to automate for years. They've tried to do it with Wi-Fi. A lot of it is physically wired connected today to get the speeds and the latency. We believe with this band that we actually can start for the first time to untether deliver on the requirements that allows them to untether and allows the complete connectivity to use CBRS together with edge compute to revolutionize the manufacturing space. Neutral host, this particular one, I think, again, as I mentioned before, we've got to get penetration of the handsets. It's going to come. The first devices with CBRS capabilities, I think we'll see some even maybe by the end of this year, but definitely going into next year. That becomes the building block. But it takes time. We have hundreds of millions of mobile subscribers in the US. They hold on to their handsets for longer periods of time. You're going to have penetration of the devices to where people are carrying them. The device that is in their pocket serves the band for it to make a meaningful difference in this particular space. But it will come, and it will come really in the next couple of years. Once you have that, you can now start to extend. You can start to do many different things with this band. You can use it as an augmented band together with your license. You can use it as a standalone band. You can now have depending on each one of the use cases, depending on the building, what type of capacity do you need to serve, you can engineer based on the need. It can be neutral host. If all of the operators are serving it and it has relatively low capacity, the band will work. Let's face it, if it's a stadium, the CBRS band alone is not going to serve all of the operators' traffic. Trust me, there's not enough spectrum to serve everything in AT&T Stadium or AT&T Park. Or I guess we're here, so, is that the Safeco one out here? Anyway, you get the point. There are scenarios where it'll work, but there's also scenarios where it's not the only answer. It'll be part of the answer. So where do we go? The time's now. From a development community, let's look at the verticals: retail, healthcare, enterprise, hospitality, mass transit, schools, campuses, universities. Through partnerships, the developer community can take this band, can innovate on the band, and deliver compelling solutions for these. Chipset device. Chipsets are available today that support the band. That's not a problem, right? That's the first step to be able to build handsets. When we think about the fixed market, the high power CPE really does require some of the other capabilities that are being certified, so we don't see them coming until 2019, but we do see them in 2019. Again, mobility, it's coming, but it'll be slow. The penetration levels will have to pick up for that to be meaningful. Machine type. If the chips are there, there's a lot of these modules that get developed for machine type communication that are special purpose. The chips are there, we can go build special purpose modules to be embedded into the machine types. I mentioned before 5G. We're on the precipice of the next generation of technology, and so if we look at, as we introduce CBRS and say, hey, it's just an LTE band, no, it's not. It starts in an LTE band or LTE capability, but it's got to evolve to 5G. There's standards work. There's work that'll have to happen within the CBRS Alliance, WinForum, as well as 3GPP to make this happen, but I'm pretty confident that that will happen too. From a standards and regulatory perspective, a lot of great work has happened to date to enable the band. We're on the precipice of being able to start GAA service. PAL, we've got the MPRM. We've got to wrap those up, get some understanding of what the rules are, so we can get to auction. As we get to auction, the spectrum, you start to have surety on where you can use how much spectrum. That'll start to accelerate several of the other use cases. We are expecting that at some point, the latter part of 19 or going into 20. Maybe we'll hear more about that. The rules, probably should be in the other order. Obviously, the rules, we need to have the final rules. We need to understand what those rules will be so that we then can build the plans, build our strategies. And then again, from an NR perspective, just can't say enough. We, together with several other partners, will be driving that specifically starting in 3GPP. So our key takeaways. The ecosystem not only must, but it will decide who will build versus borrow. Public safety. Anything that we do from a communication services perspective, AT&T being the FirstNet provider, we take public safety very serious. Anytime we put communication systems in any band, public safety is paramount. It's a requirement. Security. Security can never be underestimated. There's not a day that goes by that we don't open, the newspaper. Okay, let's face it, we read our newspapers on our tablets, but there's not a news article that we don't see where there hasn't been some issue from a security perspective. Security has to be inherent, and I know it is. It's based on a lot of the LTE standards and capabilities. But as we drive that, we can't forget about it. Edge computing. I will tell you, for me personally, in my role, I see the biggest value of the CBRS band, and if you haven't figured out, together with edge compute. The opportunities are endless when you combine them. And then the last is the device and machine type sensors. They will grow. The device capabilities will grow. So what I would say in closing is we're right at the start of something. As we continue to evolve the ecosystem, as we continue to build the capabilities, the only thing that limits is our imaginations, the way that we think. How can we use this band? Look forward to partnering with several of the folks that were on the board that are working in this band. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think we'll do great things in the band to come. So with that, I think, I'm not sure. I'll take a question or two if there is.
Do we have some microphones so that we can get to the audience? Oh, I see a gentleman running with a microphone. No questions? All right.
Oh, Joe has a question.
I always have questions. Gordon, Joe Madden, Mobile Experts. What would create a need for 5G NR in the CBRS band? Would you use massive MIMO in the CBRS band, or is it network slicing that would drive you to that? What use cases and what technology features are you really looking to implement there?
Yeah, so to be clear, the fixed wireless build that we do, even to begin with from an LTE perspective, will be massive MIMO. So we don't need 5G for massive MIMO. But as any time from a standards evolution perspective, you always have greater capabilities, lower latencies. And so latency is probably going to be the biggest driver, especially if you look in the industrial IoT space. They have some applications that are extremely low latent. Think single-digit latencies. And so 5G, getting to 5G to get to that single-digit end-to-end latency is going to be pretty crucial. And so there'll be a flow. There's a lot of the use cases that are very cost sensitive on the user equipment side. Those will stay on LTE until the cost curves of the 5G CPE come down. But anything that is driven by, whether it be a network slice capability in 5G or driven by latency requirements, will drive those use cases to go to 5G sooner. We have time for maybe one more question. There's a hand right here.
Hi Gordon, this is Mehmet Yavuz, CTO Rakus. Great presentation, and you touched upon the device side and the chipsets are available and so forth. When can we expect the CBRS devices out there? Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, where I sit, I can't comment on any particular OEM or I'll get fired. I would say that I think you will see devices with CBRS support in 2019. That's probably where your more name brand devices start to support the band. That's when I suspect that'll happen. But yeah,
Thank you.
anything more than that would get me in trouble.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.